car running around, but I was like, I got to step in the room with my boys,
Word up.
with the
Yo, we
fam.
live.
Okay,
Welcome,
we
Yes,
live
welcome,
sir.
now.
welcome aboard, Stony. It's good to
We
see you.
live. I missed y'all, man.
Yeah, it's good to see
What's
you.
good? It's good
You
to
out
see
there
you
in
too.
them
What's
Atlanta
good?
streets?
I ain't in no Atlanta, man. I'm in New York right now.
There it is. Word
I'll
up.
be there. I'll be there in a minute, though.
That's what's up. Hey, it's like, where is Waldo?
Where's Waldo?
So before we get started, hey, I just want to say this is episode 30. I think, is that like a milestone? I don't know. It probably should be like episode 100.
I feel like people should celebrate for us.
There it is.
I'm celebrating. I got my rum and coke, so I'm celebrating. There
There
you
it
go.
is, Ken. I'm just gonna hold up my iced coffee. Boom.
Yeah, hey, listen. I'm just gonna pretend that it's like some nasty Kahlua drink, and I'll laugh at you about it later.
No doubt. No doubt. Who we got in the chat? We got Chris Sumberg. Yo, what's going on? Yeah, we back, man. I'm gonna put this back together so we could do this on a regular basis. Let's start it how we usually start it. We got Ken. What's up, Ken?
Hey, what's going on, man? Ken Flux Pierce, fluxwithit.com. Let me see if I can't. I have to turn on my little lower thirds thing, but yeah, man, I've just been doing
That
a lot
crap
of
don't
sound
work.
design work lately, and just getting a lot of stuff done, man. Got some really cool stuff coming soon. So
Dope, dope. Yo, we got Stony in the place to be. What's up, Stony Music?
Hey, what's up, yo? What's going on, guys?
Chilling.
How's everybody doing?
Everything is good. Everything is good. How you
I'm
doing?
in these streets. I'm gonna be
Word.
coming in and out, so you gotta excuse me. The signal's kind of sketchy, but
It's fine. I can hear and see you just fine. It's good to have you. Hey, you
thank
still
you.
doing your Peer Mind joints?
Nah, man, I'm working on my album, man. I gotta release this music, man. It's been long waiting, and I got a new studio I'm building, so you know,
Word.
follow me on stonysworld.com and Instagram, and I have a show now that I do every Saturday at 9:30 p.m.
Mm-hmm.
Eastern. It's called Stony Sessions, and it's an IG live that I do every Saturday. So if nobody's ever been to it, come check it out. I talk about production. I talk about everything and anything. It's a great hangout. It's a good place to come and learn about different things and etiquette and all kinds of different processes.
Well, you know what I like about your show, Stony, because I've jumped on a couple times. I like to just like joining Stony in her lab,
Yeah,
and it
absolutely.
feels real cozy and intimate, and I think it's a dope piece. I love it.
And that was what I wanted to do. That's why I called it Stony Sessions, so that
Mm-hmm.
like if you were in a session with me and you came into the studio and you sat down and we vibe, that's what we do. We wouldn't just make beats. We'd be talking about things. We'd be
Mm-hmm.
building on how we want to grow, and a lot of cats don't know very basic things that we take for granted. So I just like to share with them, and just kick it. Sometimes you got people online who don't have a place or filter to come and
Mm-hmm.
share how they feel or get inspiration. So that's why I
Right.
did the show. I did it. It was a fluke because I did it, and then the people that came into the room, they were the ones like, look, come back next week. And then I just said, you know what? Let's just keep this going. Let's keep the momentum going and keep people excited. So, between that and making music and
Mm-hmm.
um I do my own one-on-one stuff too on my website. So people
Right.
can also hit me up on stonysworld.com for consultations. But I've just been mainly focusing on rebuilding, like, and just getting inspired by old things also. You see me
Mm-hmm.
pull out my 4,000.
Oh man,
Yo.
listen. Yo, Ken, Stony pulled out the 4,000 and stunned it on me. she she
you know, I
pulled that
actually
joint out, and I was like, "Oh, it's so beautiful."
I gotta talk. I got a good friend of mine that I'm in the process of getting that MPC 3500, the
Oh
rare
yeah,
3500.
The 30 or the
So
2,500?
no, the
3,500.
3500.
What's the 3,500?
3500 is there was only very few of them made, and it was actually it was a prototype of the 5000.
I know where it's
Shut
at. I know that
up.
actual one where he
Yeah,
talk about.
and
I
this
know
is
where it's
the
at. I
actual.
should just
Yeah, so
go
this
eat
is
it.
an actual 3,500. But it's
But here's
funny
the
though,
thing. But
because
here's
like
the
to me, the 4,000 is still like top of the food chain as far as that. Like
oh yeah.
the 4,000 is like the thing that I keep going back to about the 4,000 that I keep trying to get people to do again is how you could slice a loop and you could chop a loop and you would have the end of the loop and the start of the loop right next to each other.
Yeah.
Mhm.
That
Yeah.
is like one of the dopest. It's a simple but really dope feature, man.
Oh no, I agree. And then you know what I fell in love with, which is hilarious. When I turned on the 4000, there was the little girl. She was standing there tapping her feet
Oh,
as she's loading, and I was just like, "Oh shit!" I never paid attention to that until like, after a while, you don't use these pieces, and then when you open them up, you find all these little things that you took
And
for
that's your
granted.
your inner soulmate right
My inner
there.
soul, she's tapping, and then she got an attitude too. She got an attitude like it's taking too long to load.
Right.
But I pulled that out, and I also pulled out my 2080 and my 3080.
Dope.
So what
Oh,
I'm doing,
yeah, that's
Ken, is
right. You got
I'm
the
some
setting up
good.
like an
JV,
analog,
Yep.
huh?
the JV.
All the
Oh man, I
cards.
miss those
Oh,
sounds.
yeah.
Yeah.
So what I did was I'm setting up like an analog. Shout out to Hosa. They sent me a bunch of cables and stuff like that too. But I'm setting up like an analog side of my room, strictly for when
Dope.
I want to just bang on some pads and not turn the computer on. And so I said, well, you know what? Let me just put like a little setup. I got the Phantom X6, I got the 4000, and then the rolling pieces.
Yeah,
Uh-oh.
I kind of miss having a straight up workstation keyboard in my setup, and
Right.
um, there was something about
Do
just
you
being
really?
able to
You
turn
know
it
what?
on and
I've
having
never
all your
really
bread
had
and
a
butter
work.
in one spot. You know
Yeah.
Mhm.
what was that, Corey?
I never really had a workstation, so I don't know that that's something that I miss. But I do know that I really liked, excuse me, the 5080, the 3080 when I had it, but I wanted the
Mm.
5080. So I
Yeah, the
eventually sold
5080
it.
was crazy too.
Yeah, the 5080, I wanted that because it had inputs, because I was really impressed with the Cosm effects, right? Because
Right.
that's pretty much what everybody's going crazy about with the SP404 is those effects, but
Right.
the fact that it's
Right.
tactile on the 404, but it's the same amazing effects in like the 5080 and 3080, but the difference is the 5080 has input where you can run external gear through it. I believe
Yeah.
that's
And
what it is.
I think you could actually play back sample ROM or something on there. I can't
Yeah,
remember.
yeah, I think you
But
could.
between that and the other piece I always wish I had was again the ASR 10. I had the EPS back in the day, but I really
Hmm.
wanted a I would get an ASR now. I love the
Mhm.
filter. I love the filter on that thing. And I mean, yeah, outside of that, I've just been playing around with some analog stuff and
Mhm.
really just, Ableton, still deep in the Ableton and yeah, just messing with that stuff. I've been messing with the personas too, the Studio One. I've
Word,
been
I like
word.
I've been
Studio. I'm still trying to convince myself to like Ableton more because like I know that there's a lot of great stuff about it, but it's one of those things where the workflow and just the way it's laid out just never seems to quite click for me, and I always revert back to using Studio One. Like
right.
I just it's so intuitive that like
Yeah.
I
I
worked in
mean,
Logic
what
for a long time, and to me it feels like what Logic should be now. You know?
I no, I
Mhm.
totally agree. I think Studio One is, to me, Studio One is more. I don't know, very composer, very super producer, making records kind of doll. You know what I
Yeah.
mean? Where
Mhm.
Ableton is very to me, super beat maker, sound design.
It kind of
Ableton is
feels like a
all in
sketch
one.
pad. To me, it kind of feels like a sketch pad, like in the same way that Machine
Mm,
does, but with
I can see why you feel that way.
Ableton, it's like okay, I can test out lots of different arrangements, but when I'm working with Studio One, what I like to do is I'll open up Machine in it as a separate application, and I'll have
Yeah, I do
Studio
the same
One,
thing.
and
Yeah,
then I'll just drag over, and then I'm
you
like,
should
okay,
try.
well,
You should.
here's my 8 bars, and then I can copy it, bring it over, and then I'll like delete a couple of them and be like, okay, I need a variation here, a variation there, and I can do that.
Yeah,
And then I
yeah.
can still do all my master automation and all that stuff across it.
Oh no, absolutely. I see some of the cool stuff you're doing over there with the Ulterior stuff, Ken.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. They've been they've been really great to work with lately because I've been working with their hardware team a lot, and
Okay.
they're like I work with a bunch of different companies as far as hardware, and they seem to listen really well, which I don't feel like a lot of the different companies that I'll work with. Some of them will listen some way, and some of them will listen in another way, but they're very
Some
receptive
of
to
them will
critical
only
feedback.
listen if you align what they were already trying to do. But it's
Well, a
nice
lot
to
of the
be with
times it'll be
to
like,
work with a company that is actually listening to your input and your
Right.
methodology
Right.
for the input on top of that. Because sometimes, just think about it. A lot of times, suggestions and features, a lot of times they won't get it, but if you kind of give them your methodology as to why you work certain ways and stuff, the companies that listen to that along with your methodology are the good joints. I think.
That's
yeah,
real,
like
and I think Ken has been with them for a while too, and
Hmm.
I
They
mean,
trust them.
those were they respect him. They
Hmm.
respect him and the relationship, and they're gonna win. They're gonna win listening to a guy like that who is all the way in. You know what I mean?
Yep.
And that's the difference.
it seems like a lot of the companies, because a lot of the time some of the input isn't just workflow related. Like a lot of the times
Right.
it'll also be about, okay, well, if something is built X way, I can foresee Y problem coming out of that, and then like I
Mhm.
might put some input in it, and not every company is very happy to hear when you're like, you know what, I think that's going to be a problem, and they might get
Right.
the engineers want to stick to what they know, but these guys seem to be pretty on top of things, and as far as making changes and that kind of thing, which is really nice to see. So
Well, they're trying to win. They're trying to win.
yeah,
So I think it's smart.
it'll be
Yep.
interesting to see where they go in the long run because their vice president of product management moved on to a different job, so now they have another guy in that role, and but it looks like they have a nice path ahead of them already. So I'm interested to see where they go in the long run. Um,
I think they got
yeah,
big things ahead of them, and it'll be interesting to see that, like you said, that kind of almost, it's not really a rebirth, but anytime that somebody at that level leaves and the guards, the changing of the guards happen, you start to see little differences, and I think it's
Oh,
going to
I
be
mean,
an interesting way to go.
look at Akai. Look how
Hmm.
huge of a transition that was when
Yep.
all the people switched over. It changed the product altogether.
and
Yep.
it was also kind of the same guy there, so
Right.
it was, but you know, but I will say, like, he tends to, when he leaves companies, he tends to set them up for success. So that's
I
Right.
think that's brilliant, to tell you the truth. Honestly, that's a true innovator, and that's a real leader when he can step into a company and set them up for the future, stay for a certain amount of years to really get the processes in order and really get them rolling with the cadence of products and stuff, and work out the
But I
kinks.
mean, I would hope that any technology that you build that it stands the test of time
Certainly.
and that it lasts. The 4000. As many people sell, that's an old school piece. You can make
not
records
much
with
out
it.
there topping
You
it.
can still make records with it.
Yeah, that 4,000. I still want one of those. Let me just be real though. So I want a 4,000. I want a Tempest. I want an SP 1200, and
Corey said, "I want it all."
yeah, I just feel like I ain't even
Who
gonna
doesn't?
front all this. People be like, uh, this, that, and the other. I'm not gonna front. Part of me is the collector. There's a collector in me that I love. I kind of love being
Right.
able
No,
to have
absolutely.
certain pieces and
Some people treat that as like as like a bad label, like when they're like, "Oh, well, you're just collecting gear," as if it's a bad thing. And I'm like, so what? I know people that collect, model cars. I know people that collect,
yeah, man.
Pokemon cards. I know people that collect
There's
all
there's
kinds
rich
of
dudes
different
out there
stuff.
that collect actual cars.
Yeah, yeah. I got friends of mine I have friends of mine that have transformer collections that, cost as much as my studio. So I'm like,
Word.
come on, man. Like don't poo-poo somebody who likes to collect something a little bit, like
Yo, let me tell y'all something. One day, like I'm gonna share something with you guys. One day, I went to Ad Rock's crib, and I
No,
actually
hold
was
on.
gonna
Just
meet his
pause right
wife.
quick. And she said she went to Ad Rock's crib. Who y'all know who
Hmm.
Ad Rock is? We talking about the
beast.
legend Ad Rock from the Beastie Boys. Continue.
Right. Yeah. So I went to Ad Rock's crib, and so when I got there, we went up. I went up to the studio. We just kicking it. We just me, him, and his family, whatever. And then he goes, "Yo, Stoney, I want to show you something. I want to show you something." And I was just like, "Okay." And so he goes into this little room and he pulls out the 808 that he used on all these records, and it's old or whatever. And I remember his lady saying, "What are you doing with that old thing? What are you doing with that old thing?" And he was like, "I'm never selling it. I'm never selling it."
Yeah.
And it's funny because I don't know what it is with the culture now where it's like, "Oh, this shit is old. Let me sell it and get rid of it." If a dude like Ad Rock, when I saw that, I was like, "Man, I'm not selling my old pieces, man. Come on."
Yep.
This is your history. These are the things that got you where you
I'll tell you
are.
what. This is the part where I dive into my floor again, Corey.
Of course, we both diving. Let's go ahead and dive right quick. Hold on. I'm gonna flip this boy
that
over.
60?
Yes, 62.
Wow.
Yo, this 62 ain't no joke. You see, I got the thick black pads on it.
You got the fancy one.
And look at this. Yo, you see that? That's Roger Lynn's actual signature. And I got rid of the floppy drive for this local rack SD card emulator. And the joints still sound good. I cleaned it up, cleaned all the pots and everything. When I got it, it had stickers on it.
Why you don't do a shootout?
Oh,
so this one right here, man.
With the X and this, with the mold.
Corey, this one right here, this is out of all my gear, right? This is the one that I would never ever sell. This machine is the one that I won beat battles with. This is the machine. This machine was literally in the hospital room with me when my wife gave birth to my daughter.
Word. Yo, you got the zip drive in there too.
Yeah, this is the machine that basically like started me like really making beats and whatnot in a more serious sense of getting out of doing other types of music. But and mine has soul. So see if you can see that.
Ooh, you got
drum machines have soul. Yo, that's dope, Ken. Hey, I remember when those limited edition joints was out too. I had a homeboy who had the orange one with those like pink and white cloudy pads.
Yep. Yeah, that was the SE2. This is the SE1, and then the SE3 is a chrome and black one.
And
man.
And the 2000 XL is the 2000 XL is the MPC that I started on. So that machine holds a special spot in my heart.
Yeah, this is the MPC I started on as well. And this one actually came from the producer who at the time was producing my records. Because at the time that I got it, I was actually a battle MC back then, and I was making the circuits then as an MC, and I wanted to make my own beats. So I got a EMU MP7 and I was working on that, but I wanted an MPC, but I couldn't afford one. And he actually sold me this one. It had just came out, and he tried to make a modification to it and broke it. And I took it home and fixed it. So I got it, fixed it, and kind of what path of like working with more hip hop technology gear and that sort of thing, and going into beat battles and doing all that. So to me, it's super sentimental. I'll never sell it. Like I've got other pieces of gear that are worth more money. I've got some other pieces of gear that are way more rare, but this is the one that I would never sell.
Yeah, I can't blame you, man. And I actually regret there's pieces that I regret that I've sold, and the MPC 2000 XL was one of them. And you know what? I've had two and sold them. But here's what I'll say. I had my 2000 XL when I was still living in Chicago. That was my piece for years. That's what I used to do everything. I kind of cut my teeth and learned on that. And then I moved to California and I sold it because I needed the cash to move to California. And when I got settled, about 6 months in, I bought another one for a good price used. Then I realized I didn't have the room for it. About 6 months after that, I sold it again and went all software. And then that was the way.
Yeah, I kept I got my 2000 is still in the bag. There's a
Well,
Word.
you
bad
and see, you were using the same gear and you were winning beat battles with the same gear. So I'm
yeah,
sure you've got a
yeah.
2000 that's just as
Oh,
sentimental on that level.
let me tell you, I had my 2000 still has the picture. I had like a laminate picture of my son
Hmm.
on the 2000. So like it's still there. You got to see it.
Because
You
that
got to
was the
see a
one you
little.
were winning the New York beat battle with, right?
I was destroying them with it.
Yeah.
And now when I look at it, I go, man, I did all this stuff with this. It was like if when you go back and look, you go, man, I can't believe I did
Doing
all
more with
this work
less.
with such little bit of gear. You know what I'm
Yeah.
saying? All I had was the 2000. I didn't have anything else.
Hmm. Oh, but you know what I had? You know what I had around that time? It was the cord, the micro cord had just come out when I had my 2000
Oh, I
XL,
always
and I
wanted one of
bought
those
it.
too.
Yeah, I bought it. I had it for almost probably a decade. I bought that joint, and I had it was a floor model. They were selling like hotcakes. They had
Yeah,
just
they
come
were
out.
everywhere. They
Yes,
were
they were.
everywhere. You
And
would see them
they was like, we don't got
every
the
weekend.
box,
You'd
but you
see
can
them on
buy this.
Saturday Night Live. You'd see
Yes.
them like all the live performances had those things. They were everywhere.
Yeah, yeah, exactly, man.
Whoever was
And I've
doing
kept that
that's
for a
something I'd
long
like to look
time.
into. Whoever was doing Korg's press management back then was killing it.
Oh
Like
yeah,
whoever
they
was doing
were.
their artist relations back
Oh,
then, because you saw the
oh,
Triton on every stage, you saw the micro Korg on every stage. Like
Hmm.
those things, the MS 2000,
They were killing
uh,
it.
dude, those things were everywhere.
Yep, yep. I totally agree, man. I had that joint with the MPC, and I felt like I had like the master setup.
And here's the
And
other thing about not selling. I have another 2000 XL that's actually broken, but I'd never sell it because it's got graffiti tags all over it from my whole
oh,
crew
dope.
from back in the day. And it's like, it was like back then we didn't have a lot of money or anything. So it was like when we got a piece of gear, the whole crew used it. You know what I mean? So that was the MPC that like the whole crew used to make beats with. And you know, it resides in my studio now, and it's like if one of them ever came to me and was like, yo, I want to put it in my trophy case, I would instantly be like, all right, put it in yours. You know what I mean? Because it's like that thing's
Hmm.
legendary in this area, you
Hey
know.
Ken, you know something? It's funny you said that. I remember there was a time when, um, now tell me how you feel about it, where cats had crews. You know what I'm saying? And
Yeah,
everybody used the same piece, and it was okay to use the same piece. It's
yeah.
almost like, nah, I don't use this. I use this. And I don't use like now. Everybody's like, nah, I don't use that. I use that. Whereas there was a time where everybody used the same joint, and they
And
just got
still,
busy.
and
Like
still had
Yeah.
their own sounds
right?
too. Now there was
Yep.
a
Yeah, it
thing
had their
about
own
that.
vibe.
Yeah.
Yep. Yep. And the funny thing was is like we all everybody in my crew at that time, there's one dude who had a SP808EX. But other than that, everybody used it like an MPC 2000 XL or MPC 2000 Classic. And we all used it totally different. We all sequenced completely different. Like
Hmm.
my boy Serafino was nasty, and he would do like 8 beats on a single disc. Like his beats were always like he could reuse sounds
That's
from
clever.
one beat and put them in another. And me, I was neurotic. Like all mine were it was like one disc to a beat, and it was like everything was on it. Like I would use everything original on every single beat, and I was like crazy about it. And I had other guys that would like they would do their entire beat would be one long sequence. You know what I mean? Like
Mhm.
they wouldn't do separate sequences and then put it together. It would just they would program it up 94 bars or whatever and then just go through it like that straight away. So we all had different ways of working, even though we were on the same piece of gear. It was crazy.
Yep, yep, yep. That's true. That's the way it went
Yeah,
down back then, yo.
I missed that. I mean, can you guys hear me? Okay,
Yep,
Yep.
yeah,
yep.
my signal's terrible, but I feel like cats have teams now, and it feels like everybody's like, okay, there's the one guy who's the star of the team, and then everybody else is like non-existent, right? You don't really know who the other guys are.
Yep.
Like, what do you guys feel about that whole era? Like when like Ken, like you said, you had your crew, and everybody in your crew was a star. Each one of you guys had something special, and everybody celebrated everybody. I don't see that as much with production crews. Like, I don't see that.
Well, for me though, I don't necessarily come from a background where there was a production crew. I come from a background where we was an MC crew. All of us were MCs and one or two dudes produced.
That
And
was more common.
Yeah, that was more common, and that's kind of what my background is. So I was an MC, and all my men's was MCs, and I had my one homeboy who always had gear. He taught me how to use the MPC. And at a point, there's a transitional stage when people start getting older, responsibilities start taking place, and interests start going in different directions. And I found myself as a solo MC. In the meantime and in between time, and I start going all around the city, all over the place, looking for beats and working with producers. Some cats will have an SP 1200, some cats had MPCs, and I never could quite get the vibe that I wanted. So then I end up buying an MPC, and my man, yep, I bought it because I was like, I got to make my own stuff. You know what I mean?
My problem was that all the beats that guys were giving me sounded too clean. Like everything was made either in Pro Tools or it was made, with romplers and stuff. And I wanted dirty samples. Like I wanted really grimy drums, and like I knew the sound that I wanted, but nobody around me was really making it. But then when I started producing, other cats that were producing kind of would gravitate to each other and be like, oh, he's using an MPC, and then like they would link up. So my crew was really different in the regard that we had at one point it was 8 members, and I think
that's a huge production crew. That's
probably
dope.
5 or 6 of us were producers, and and most of us were producers and MCs. But it was it was a lot of producers in the area, and then on top of that, we had there was another crew that was going just as parallel to us, and they had probably 5 or 6 producers with them as well. So like and this is all in a really tight area. Like we were all pretty close, so there was just a lot of producers in my area. And at the time it was like people weren't really sharing tips with each other, but as you formed a crew, people would kind of be like, all right, well, I'll share some tips with the people that are in my crew. Right. But other than that, you weren't really
the thing back then, wasn't it? It's funny that we all are proponents of sharing our knowledge online and showing people what we've come across and techniques we've adapted, used, or created.
This would have been early like MySpace days, man.
But that's the thing. Like in those days and even further back, hip hop has always been a place where it's like you could be at a block party or a party and love what the DJ is playing, and you go up there to try to look at the record, and they'll have it'll be blacked out.
Yeah. We used to rip labels off. Yeah, because I remember when we would go digging, what was really fun was this. So around my way, there's a flea market, and if you're in the Delaware area or South Philly area, there's a flea market right off of Route 13 in Wilmington that is amazing for record digging. But when we would go out there, it got so competitive with so many producers that were like, and this is before the internet explosion of everybody wants to be a producer. It was still kind of like a small thing, but it was like maybe six or 7 of us would show up at this flea market, and man, like the looks people would be shooting each other because everybody be trying to find a record first. You know what I mean? Like,
but you know what's funny, Ken? You're so right, because it used to be a time where it was taboo to be a producer because you didn't know what the studio was.
Yeah, exactly.
You didn't know what happened in the studio. You didn't know where to get the gear from. Like everybody couldn't just get an MP because it was so expensive. You know what I'm saying?
I remember, dude. Most people didn't even know what they were. A lot of people didn't even know what it was, and you had to get. I was one of the lucky ones that found out about what is it called, Future Producer magazine, like real early on. So I had Future Producer back in like the 90s. I had that back in the 90s, and you could open up the back pages and it would have advertisements for different drum machines in there, right? And I would drool over that thing like little kids would over the Toys R Us catalog. I was drooling over Future Music catalogs and looking in the back of them.
Before, I told Corey, I said, yo, I used to have the Pete Rock and CL Smooth CD cover. I don't remember which album it was, and you could see Pete Rock sitting there, and he had an SP 1200. Yep. And he had all this stuff, and I was like, oh, man, I just sit there and just like, wow. You know what I'm saying?
There was and it was also Q-Tip, too, because Q-Tip and RZA both would kind of like throw sly lines about what gear they were using in their raps. and I would like so like I learned like I didn't know what a base station was until RZA said it, you know?
Yo,
Yo, did I lose you?
yeah, we lost you for a second. You say you
Oh, okay.
station was it to RZA said it?
Yeah. When he said program fat baselines on Novation. I
Yeah.
didn't know what he was talking about at first, and I had to go look up. I was like, what is he talking about? And I had to go and learn about it that way because people just were thinking it was like a throwaway line. I was like, nah,
Mhm.
man, he's giving me
Yeah,
secrets.
he's telling you what's up. That's what's up.
Yeah.
Hey, speaking of that, I gotta say the Novation Base Station 2, I had posted it a couple times recently on my Instagram. I truly, truly love that synth. I don't know why I don't have that synth still.
First came out because it didn't have CV, and it was around the same time that like the Mini Brooder came out and it had CV, and what else was it that something else came out that had CV on it, and I was like, and then the MS-20 Mini had CV, and
Yeah,
then
yeah,
maybe it was like I think the Waldorf Pulse 2 had been announced or something, and I
yeah.
was just like CV, 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 so I kind of skipped over it. But then I messed with it later on. I was like, oh my god, this thing's actually really dope.
It's a
Like
monster of a
I
synth,
like it,
man.
man. Like, and for the price, you can get those things for so cheap.
You can. Yep.
And honestly, I like them. Like, it's not everybody likes every synth. But I personally really like that one. Some people, like, I've heard different criticisms of them, but to be honest with you, I don't ever listen to criticisms like that. Like, that's actually one of the reasons why I don't hardly ever do just straight reviews of synthesizers.
Hmm.
People were like, "Oh, give me your review of it," and I'm like, honestly, reviews are bullshit. Like, they, like 9 times out of 10, like when I was reading certain reviews about like the mini log and whatnot, and people were like, "Oh, well, it sounds like this, it sounds like that," and I got one. I loved it. Like, I absolutely loved it. Yeah, the filter loses all the bass when you pull the resonance up. That's fine, but if you play it as 4-note pads, you don't necessarily want all that bass there. Like,
Hmm.
it there's something about that thing that I personally really liked, but other people will really hate. And it's not wrong to hate it either, and it's not wrong to love it. It's just that, to me, if you're gonna listen to reviews, you want to know who it is that's reviewing it, and you want to know their taste and whether it lines up with you. And
Yeah,
I
yeah,
feel
yeah.
like,
See, that's like KRS-One used to say, if you don't know the history of the author, you don't know what you're reading. And that is
and
similar
going
with
back to future
reviews.
music, that's one of the reasons why I actually like
You got your Max Headroom thing going on. Yo. So, yo, you still there, Ken? Maybe not. Let's give it a second. So, yo, hey, I'm gonna tell y'all. I saw something on Facebook. Somebody posted, actually a pretty good FB acquaintance of mine posted something. He said, "Hey, the drum machines go out of style when samplers came into being." Let's see, out of style when samplers came into being. And you know what? When I listened to that, I was like, nah, that's not necessarily the truth. Um, I used to think so, but then when you got a good drum machine, you know better. You still there, Ken?
Yeah, I'm here. Can you hear me now?
Oh, okay. What you
Can
think
you
of
hear
that?
me?
Yeah, I can hear you now.
Okay,
What you
yeah,
think
I
of that?
wasn't sure.
Somebody
Unfortunately, because
said,
I'm in the jail cell, I'm on Wi-Fi right now,
yeah,
which isn't as great as my previous connection. I'll have that fixed by next week, though. But yeah, like, to me, as far as drum machines versus samplers, and this is something that there was a Facebook post about it recently also, and
yeah,
I kind
yeah,
of got into it on there. And to me, yeah, there was a change of guard, as it were,
yeah,
in audio gear, where it went from people trying to do synthesized drum and then realizing that synthesized drums don't sound like acoustic drums.
right.
So, but it was new technology. So it was like, okay, we're just switching over, and this new technology is superior. So let's forget the old stuff. But then
Hmm.
after that new technology became old hat, people started realizing, oh, but I like those old sounds too for exactly what they are. And now, to me, it's all, you start seeing things like rhythm, tempest, that kind of thing where they
Yeah.
combine the two, lines are blurred, samplers that act like drum machines that act like samplers, that
Yeah,
kind of
yeah.
thing. So to
Because
me, it's kind of a moot point now.
yeah, it is. But the thing is too, one of the things that's nice about you actually have a good point about the parameters that are in samplers now, where you can start to tweak and shape and really change the sound of your samples, whereas it used to just be a static snapshot of whatever it was you
Yeah,
captured,
yeah. It used to be just sample playback, and
right?
now it's actual sample manipulation. I mean, you can get
Hmm.
into, and not even that. Like you can go. There's so many different methods of sample manipulations. Talking like granular and
Yeah,
partials and all that kind of stuff. So you can get into some deeper stuff with samples now,
yeah,
and you have CPUs that are fast enough to where you can make real-time changes to samples, whereas before you couldn't do that. It was like if you try to
yeah. You
manipulate a
said
start and end
that.
point, things would have
Yeah. Hmm.
stopped or broken up, or they wouldn't allow the sequencer to run at the same time that you're doing that kind of stuff. So you
Yeah,
know
that's what's up. And then, but see, too, when you have a good drum machine, is one of the things that on that whole point, when you got a good drum machine, you start to see that it's not just a 808 sample pack when you can actually tweak the voice. It's not just whatever the drum sound is like. It's not even the same as like tweaking a sample and manipulating the sample. When you have a good drum machine, when you could like the Tempest or the Rhythm MK2, even the Rhythm MK1, you got those synthesizer voices in there where you could really tweak and change the sound and make it into anything that you want, unlike the way you can do with a sample. So I thought that was an interesting thing that my man said, depending on what fits your workflow, my personal preference of samplers. And I could dig that because you can make a sampler into almost anything nowadays, to Ken's point. Um, that's what somebody was saying in the chat.
here's what I'll say about drum machines and sampling sequencers, such as when I talk like that, I want to just kind of clarify. I'm talking like MPC. I'm talking like I mean, really, even the sampling and sequencing side of something like Machine or the newer MPCs, that kind of thing. The
Mhm.
method that you use those is fairly so if we go back to like the MPC 2000, and then even the newer MPCs like the studio,
This the live and the MPCX.
like the newer stuff tends to have a
Hmm.
little bit more real-time control. So I'm not really talking about that. But when I talk about like a sampler, like a MPC or something,
Yeah.
you don't have that same control. So let's say I have behind me in that corner, right? I'm going to go ahead and brag. I've got like a $3,000, $3,500 modular drum system. It's amazing. It's
Hmm.
fantastic. Sounds exactly how I want it to sound because it has the modules that I want in it, right? But there's a lot of drawbacks to that. I can't just turn it on and instantly have exactly what I had before. I got to set things up. Maybe even if I left it how it was, I still have to go and adjust decay. I still got to, things drift just a little bit. I still got to kind of tweak it. The immediacy of the sampler gives me that exact sound. Now, that being said, let's say I'm recording I'm recording a new track, right? And I'm
Hmm.
in my own comfortable digs, okay?
Yep.
And I want to use that style of sound. I'm going to go ahead and use that and track it live straight into the DAW, and I'm going to do what I want to do with it. And it's going to be all like, I can do it on the fly. I can do this. I can do that. And I will use that. But that's not always the proper case. So I'm constantly, as a sound designer, I'm already making my own kits and whatnot,
Right.
and putting those out. But I'm also sampling my own sounds. Like if I come up with a really cool sound on that, I sample it and put it into my own sound banks for later anyway.
Word.
That
Word.
being said, just because I have all the sounds from that I make in my sampler does not mean it gives me the same vibe when I go back to play
Boom.
it.
That's it. That's it. Because sounds that you throw in your sampler, you can mesh them and mold them into something totally different. It becomes that session. Things that you use
Yeah.
in a certain session don't necessarily mean that it's just going to be the same exact sound from previous. It may have some similarities, but things in a sampler could take on a whole new life in a whole new way.
Yeah, it's one
All
of those
together.
things where workflow directly impacting how something ends up sounding on a track. You know what I
Mhm.
mean? Like it's a lot of times you want to say, oh, okay, well, workflow and sound, it's two separate topics. And just because I have a different workflow, I can still get the same sound. In this case, the workflow helps mold how the sound actually ends up coming out. And sometimes I want the sample version of it, but a lot of the times if I'm given the comfortable digs, then yeah, I'm going to go back to using that thing. But if I'm, on the move, then yeah, I'm going to go ahead and I'll sample it up and I'll do other things like that. For live, I'd much rather just throw my samples from my modular into a sampler and then be live like that, because that's going to have way less chance that I screw up and that kind of thing,
Yep. Hey, let me ask you though. Let's get into some semi-modular. I wish Stony was still on here because I'm looking forward to her getting into semi-modular stuff. And just ignore the fact that me and T'Challa is over here having a conversation. By the way, I hate that I bought the one that doesn't have the articulating arms. It don't bend at the elbow.
Always
But
got to have bending at the elbow,
but
man.
the
What's wrong
hand
with you?
twists. What kind of situation is that though?
Can't even talk because I went back to my old studio 2 days ago, and all my stuff is still there. I still have the old studio is still there. It's still somewhat intact, and like my Doctor Doom, and like I've got all kinds of Iron Man figures. I'm a comic book nerd, so I have all that stuff, but it's all still there, and it's driving me nuts that I don't have it here. That's that creative inspiration stuff.
It
man.
is. It is. Honestly, I have this sitting over by my my modular rig, and it's just sitting there. It feels like my modular rig is not Euro rack; it's like Wakanda rack. But yo, somebody said, remember the SP1200 all day. I'm about 3 seconds from having the SP1200 in here. Just gotta finalize the situation.
Yeah, I'm jealous
Can't wait to
about
get
that.
that. Can't wait to get it. That is honestly, I have the MPC 60 because I couldn't at that point.
Wanted that.
Yeah, I really wanted the SP1200, but
Yeah.
I wasn't about to go for those prices, and especially at that time. And then I happened to find a dude who was a little drive away, kind of out by where Bryce lives from my direction, and he had this MPC 60 for $400. I think I got it for $350, and I went and I chilled with him. Turns out he had produced quite a few things, and there was a disc in there. I think I remember the disc had somebody's beat on it. I can't remember. I hate that I can't remember. Anyway,
Wasn't it like that wasn't the D'Angelo thing or whatever, was it? It was.
No, I don't think so. No, it wasn't D'Angelo, but it was because the disc had some artist's name on it.
I remember talking about that before. Yeah.
Yeah. But it was a good come up, and I end up putting just a little bit of money into it and cleaning it up. And actually, this is the latest article ever. I did a part 1 and a part 2 of fixing this up, and somebody just recently hit me up on Instagram like, "Yo, whatever happened to part 3?" And so I got to finish up and do a part 3 on that article on B-Boy Tech Report. But yeah, I only got this just because I wanted the SP1200 and couldn't get one at the time. But I'll have an SP1200 joining the fray over here soon enough. And Sam knows. Sam Botstein is in the chat right now. It's funny. Every now and then I'll hit Sam up like, "Yo, I got a weird question about SP1200. Why don't you give me that SP1200?" He'd be like, "Man, you know damn well I cannot give you the SP1200."
That was part of the reason why I wanted to produce for myself was the SP1200, because we used to take those Gemini DJ samplers, and we would take the sampler to the studio, and the dude there had a SP1200, and we would sample from that into the SP1200, and it was, oh man. Yeah, I still want one, but there's no way in hell I'd pay $5,000 for one. Like, no
way.
I think that's, and it gets back to that whole collector's thing and what is the market. But to be perfectly honest with you, I don't even think the market is 5,000. Like, no matter how rare
I think they're trying to push the market to 5,000. It ain't there. It's not there, man.
Yeah,
luckily, I got a really fair seller, so I'm coming up on a.
I can see price. Like I can kind of see 3K. I can see 3,000 because of certain factors, but even then, it's like
if you can get it for less, it'd be better.
It's still a collector's piece at that price. Like it's not, But who knows? Maybe Dave will be nice and do his new version. Who knows?
So that's the thing, though. When I talk to Dave Rossum, so those out there, I want to take it for granted that everybody out there knows who Dave Rossum is. So Dave Rossum is, the man behind the SP1200 and the EMU company in general, the original owner and creator.
He's the founder.
He's the founder of the Emu company who made the SP1200 and many other really dope instruments. And he's doing Eurorack stuff now. His company was it Dave Rossum or Rossum Electronics? Yeah,
Rossum Electro Music.
Yeah, Rossum Electro Music. So Ken and I, when we run into him on our separate accords at NAM, he mentions the SP1200. He actually asked me at NAM this year, like Dave Rossum asked me this. He's like, "Do you think it's a market for the SP1200? Do you think there's still a market for the SP1200?" And just as he said that, somebody walked up and was like, "Oh my God, Dave Rossum, you made the SP1200." And I was like, "Hell yeah, so this is one of his instruments that Ken's
Yeah, this is one of his modules here. So this is his new company here.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, the thing is but he was also very adamant to say, if anybody's going to do it, it's going to be me. And he had like a fire in his eye when he said it too. Like he was,
right.
Yeah. So, there's another thing about that. I've been, cause I've been talking with different companies and whatnot, and every company that I talk to talks about, certain legacy products. That's one product that kind of always comes to people's name, to people's tongue. And also the thing is that the way that he did workflow was really just, considering how ahead of his time he was, as far as like, this is the guy that not only did he design the SP1200, he designed the first samplers. Like he designed the chips themselves. You know what I mean? Like this. So we're not just talking about a guy who's saying, "Oh, slap this together for me." This is the guy who was actually putting it together. But he was coming up with
the electronics behind
the workflow. Is actually ridiculously smooth. If you consider how slow the processors are in those pieces of gear. Like I have a EMU Emax down here, and I freaking love it. And the workflow should be a pain in the ass, right? It should be. And for as old as it is, and for the type of controls that are on top of it, you would think that, oh, this thing's going to be hard to work with. No, it's easier to work with than a lot of newer gear is. And it's because that they just understood a musician's workflow, So yeah, if he was to do something like that, I would just, I'd be plunking down cash right away.
But so what's the thing? I gotta say, if he was to do something like that, I'm so torn between straight up reissue and additions. Like, okay, so like for instance, a good example is something like the Moog Model D. When I feel like that's a Model E, because there's enough changes on it. It's still the same machine, but it's improved enough that it can be the next version. You know what I mean?
Think that if Dave was to do another SP12, I don't think he'd be content just doing a reissue. The type of mind that he is, I mean, you look at his modules; they're forward thinking. They have nods to his past forward to the future, and I think that's more where his mind would be.
That's kind of where I would want it to go, but there's a fine line right between. But see, here's what it is. Obviously, you like the obvious improvements, like more sample time. You know what I mean?
I don't think that's where his head would be, though. Like his head is more like, oh, well, I want to have that same kind of hands-on control, maybe do something with the fader type layout and all. But I could see him being like, well, now we can do like phase alignment synthesis, and we can do this, and we can do that, and like and just taking things into some weird esoteric areas that, but doing it in a way that's actually intuitive to use. Like that's what I could see him looking towards, and that's what I would kind of hope for too, because even though they've reissued
the obvious
chips now,
the obvious ability to interface with the current type of setup, right, without going too far there.
I would just like to see it. I'd be happy with both. I'd love to see him do like just one more run, because they reissued the SP1200 once already. So why not do it one more time? Reissue it again, and then also and maybe use that money to fund doing a whole new version. I'd be all for it, and I'd want both of them.
I wouldn't be mad about that, and I'd probably want both of them too. I wouldn't be mad about that, but my luck is like this. Once I nab this SP1200, it'll likely be like a couple months later. He'll be like, "Here's the new version." That's the way my luck goes. But
I will say that so I picked up the Emax for a couple of reasons, part of the reason was that you can get very close to that SP1200 sound. It's not exactly the same sound, but it uses very similar chipset, and you actually have more control over the sound because you can change you can change a variable sampling rate on there. You can go up and down. You can stretch your keys even further than the 1200 could. So you can actually make it even more gritty. But the fact that I could also easily key map to it, and I can make instruments with it. And then I've actually already done I sampled my Rhodes into it and did a library that's
Nice.
up on sounds.com with that. But my point being is just that because there are ways of getting that sound now at a much lower price point. And also, I'll be the first person to tell you, as much as I love analog and vintage gear, man, you cannot deny the fact that Decimort 2 gets you damn close. Like, if you know how to use it properly, and Decimort 2, for those who don't know, is a VST plugin. It will emulate vintage gear, and it'll really get you close. So that's why I get back to it's a collector's thing, you know.
I wanna also say that the Auto Biscuit, this joint right here, will get you that sound. They stopped making this. This is like one of the last ones. I think I bought it. I couldn't find it anywhere else, and I had anyway. Yeah, this was one of the last. They stopped making these, but now Universal Audio has modeled this as a plug-in, and it sounds pretty damn close. I should do a video comparison between the hardware and the VST. But yeah, this is another way to get that kind of SP1200 sound, and it does pretty well at it too. Yes, sir. Let's see. Decimort and Devastator is a
Devastator's another plugin by D16, and I actually like their reverb too, because it has a kind of old school reverb sound to it. But I really enjoy their plugins and how you can use them. The thing that I found with their plugins is that you really need to be careful with the mix control on them, and just kind of like, they can be a little heavy-handed as far as how they sound. But if you kind of mix them in properly, man, they can sound so good, and they get you where you want to be. And even more importantly, in a mix, they sound better. Like, I think in a mix, they actually, because a lot of the times what I want out of the grittiness of something like a SP1200 or an MPC or whatever, like any vintage sampler, there's like a shine that comes on there. Like, I know you can think about how it'll make a sample dark if you go way lower on there, but there's a shine when you're doing your drums. Like, especially like, say you have a kick drum and it starts aliasing, you get those little square waves out of it that kind of shine off of the sample, and it helps it actually cut through the mix a little bit better. And that's what, to me, Decimort does that perfectly. Like, I use that. And
I have Decimort. I don't use it as much, but I definitely want to use it more to kind of see what it's like. I got a couple of tools that I like to use, that sometimes it makes me forget about other things that I might have access to.
It's just one of those things that, like, if I'm working on something, I like using the original gear. But man, like, sometimes if I'm just working on something, I'm in the creative flow, and I'm like, man, this would really sound good if it was just a little bit crunchier. That's the first thing I go to, man. That is the first thing I go to.
Hey, Ken, tell me about, I want to switch gears a little bit. Tell me about the
Magneto.
No, not Magneto, actually. I do. At some point, we should talk about Magneto, but I want to know about that red joint right there, and the name is
right here
in my mind.
The Neutron.
Yeah, tell me a little bit about the Neutron.
If I can't, see if I can't, like that guy, right?
Yep.
Yeah. They should be just about ready for production. I haven't talked to the guys in a little over a week. But
bruh, that rack is stupid sick.
Oh yeah,
that rack is dumb.
Yeah,
come on,
man. I got the
Rossum
filter just laying on top.
Oh man.
Yeah, this thing is, man, anybody hating on this thing is just being bitter, because it's so good, and the fact that they're doing this at $299 is like,
that's crazy,
mind numbing.
Crazy.
I use it constantly with the Mini Brute 2S. Like I put it in this rack when I first got it just to be like, oh, okay, well let me see how it feels racked up. There's a missing module here right now that I have to fill back in, but it hasn't left that rack since then because I like it. I like the pairing so much.
Mhm.
It's super useful in so many different ways, man. Like the patch panel is fantastic.
Right.
The oscillators sound great. You can switch the oscillators switching between waveforms. So like here's the shape knob right here. And I don't know if you can see the lights flashing
Yeah,
or
I can see
not.
the
Let me
lights.
make my screen bigger. But yeah, so if you right, like I'm kind of
Hmm.
and it's actually flashing a bit because I have an LFO going into it right now. So you can see it kind of blending between those wave shapes
Yeah,
right
that's
now.
dope. That's
You
very
can
modular style for that to be a desktop slash, Eurorack
you can change
mountable.
this to where it'll just switch between waveforms or it'll blend between waveforms. And you can do the same with the LFO too.
Right.
There's like a lot of little hidden functions with button presses that you can do for setting it up. Like on the patch panel, this lower right one here is assign. You can assign that to be a bunch of different functions depending on what you want. Like you can make that if you have a MIDI cable plugged in. You can make this be your mod wheel output. You can make it be volt per octave output. You
Nice.
can do lots of different stuff with it. But at the end of the
So I
day,
think it has a good, from what I've heard from the demos and from what you've been doing, I feel like it has its own personality. It has a good like sound.
the filter's dope, man. Like the
Yeah.
filter has a lot of it's got a lot of balls for being a two pole filter, like a 12 dB filter. Um, it's really cool because so the Mini Brute is a two pole filter and this is a two pole filter, and they couldn't sound more different.
Yeah.
Even though
Right.
they both get ballsy, they both have that, if you turn up the resonance, you can get squelchy with them and whatnot.
Yep.
They sound completely different. They both sound great, but they sound totally different. I
Hmm.
spent I spent like 3 or 4 days where I was just like creating patches on one and then recreating the patch on the other one and then trying to get them as close as I could to each other.
Right.
Man, they are so different. It's which is wonderful because like when you put them in a rack together, it's like
Yeah.
they
Yeah. You
complement
get
each other
different.
really
Yeah.
nicely.
They complement each other. They don't clash at all, and you kind of build from both of them. That's good to have those differences in your rack like that.
Like right now, can you guys hear that?
Yep.
Hold
A
on,
little
see if
bit.
I can. Uh, do you hear that?
Yep.
So that's just the neutron right now. It's going in through the magneto, but the magneto is not on. If I turn it on, like, but yeah, it's Where's my
So the thing that's dope too about this is that a lot of people, like, that's why I mentioned Stony with the semi-modular game. So a lot of cats may want to explore modular but don't necessarily want to go, you know, all in like we have like that. But
Yeah,
I think the semi-modular world is really on the come up, and that's a good place to start. That's the place where you can really kind of get your hands in, and a device like this, he's Ken has it rack mounted, but it's a desktop synth that is rack mountable, right? So it could
the
either
thing
be a
I'll say
regular
about it though
desktop
is
synth.
this.
Yeah.
Here's the thing I'll say about it though. You're gonna want to have some sort of sequencer to go with it.
Mhm.
It works great with a MIDI keyboard. That's true. And in truth, let's say you had something like Machine or an MPC, Ableton Live, whatever else it is, right? You can
Mhm.
certainly just plug a MIDI cable into here and hold on, I'll grab the when you get it, it actually comes with its own case, right? And on the
Yeah.
back of that case is 1/4 inch outputs, 1/4 inch input, I think. And it's got USB and then MIDI in and out DIN, right? So you can actually
Okay.
just plug a USB cable into it and sequence it right from Ableton Live. You could sequence it from Machine. If you got Reactor, you could set up a Reactor patch and be
Mhm.
sequencing it from that. So you don't necessarily need any other Eurorack stuff in order to do that. But and self patching it like I have here, like basically um, I'm not doing anything outside of the neutron right now, aside from just pitching gate. I'm just sequencing it from the mini brute right now.
Okay.
Everything else is internally patched, different points to itself. But my point is that you can get completely by with just using MIDI, but when you have a like an actual hardware sequencer or something that you can patch to it, that's when it gets way more fun. It's just absolutely ridiculous if you can tie it into something like even if you had like a Mother 32, the
Right.
Mother 32 has a
Has a
built-in
sequencer.
sequencer on it.
Yeah,
You
that's a
can
nice
use
sequencer
that.
too. Yep.
Mini Brute 2S has its sequencer. You could use a key step or a beat step, whatever. All of those different things. When you have something else that you can patch into it, that's when it gets really fun. But as a starting point for modular, yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
The only thing that you would need after that is an actual rack to put it in,
Mhm. But you don't necessarily need a rack unless you're thinking about going, more into the modular world, right? Because it's a desktop synth as well.
So I mean, I'm saying like if you wanted to,
That's the
use
starting
more
point, and
modules.
that the starting
I'm talking
point.
about using more modules. So this is the rack that it comes with,
Yeah.
right? Don't worry about I've been making my own little LED lights. Like I'll show you something. Check this out.
Word.
You see that light flashing right here that I just plugged in? Where's it at? Right
Mhm.
here. So now actually I'll put it into here so you can see it brighter. But yeah, so that guy right there flashing away. I don't know. But anyway, so this is the case, right? This is what it comes in. And all I did was unscrew it from the case, and you unplug this cable right here. You need to keep the case. Don't throw this away if you get it, though, because if you ever do a firmware update, you have to put it back into its case to do your firmware update because the firmware is through the back. Here's the back panel. Okay. And I'm going to try and hold this steady so that you guys can see it. Okay. Now, there's a few things to note on here. So we have our MIDI through, which is good to have. That seems to be missing on a lot of products these days, MIDI through.
Mm-hmm.
You got your USB, so you can do your MIDI through USB, and there's also DIN MIDI on the front here, all right?
Right.
And then you've got phono with its own control for the phono volume, all right? And then you got your power over here. These dip switches let you set your MIDI channel, okay? So you can set MIDI channel right from here.
Right.
But
Oh, dope. Okay, so it's dip switch MIDI channel set. Okay.
yeah, so one of the really cool things about this though is the fact that it has input on it. You can use it to process your gear. Like if you want to send samples through it, if you know how you're always hearing people say, "Oh yeah, but I love the MPC for the analog filter," when they're talking about the 60 or the S900 or even the SP1200. I'll be the first person to tell you. I
Is that the same
disagree.
filter on the 3000? The
Say again?
S900? Is that the same filter on the 3000 and 950?
No.
The MPC
The
60?
the analog filter is on the 60, 62, 900, S900 and S950.
Okay.
The 3000 I believe is a digital filter if I'm correct.
Okay.
Sam will correct me if I'm wrong.
I thought the S900. Well, I got to.
The S900 is an analog filter in there.
Yeah. Okay. Cool.
Yeah. So, but to my point, those filters are not my favorite personally. I mean, I like they're there. That's cool, but I would much rather have a filter like this, and the fact that you can just run your gear right into this thing and then back out. And then you can control the filter with modulation. You can tempo sync it, all that kind of stuff right there. To me, the fact that you get that for $299 is absolutely insane. It's just there's so much usefulness out of this thing. One of the can I show you a quick patch that's really cool?
Go for it.
So you could talk about whatever. I'm gonna patch
Yeah,
this up.
it's all good. So I'm looking in the chat, and Alpha Magnetic, I love that name, by the way. Alpha Magnetic is saying that the MPC Live is having some MIDI issue, or his MPC Live. I don't know if this is a thing with all the MPC Lives, but he's saying he wants to sequence the MPC Live as an external piece of gear, basically. He wants to take that and control it with another sequencer, and there's something weird with the MIDI setup. So you can send MIDI data out in MIDI mode, but not in drum mode. So that's interesting. I don't know. I wonder if that's happening with everybody.
Well, I can tell you that I think hopefully it's not just a CPU issue. I know like the Tempest, for instance, if you sequence on your Tempest,
Mm-hmm.
you can't send the MIDI out of that sequence out of the Tempest, which is absolutely insane. So like let's say I wanted to use the Tempest and I did a pattern in it and I wanted that pattern to be triggering my modular using MIDI. I can't do it
Mm-hmm.
because apparently the CPU that they put in the Tempest is
Can't handle it.
underpowered and they can't do it. Yeah. So it's just very, which is highly expensive as that damn thing is.
Yeah,
But
exactly. Well, you know
we
that's
don't want
one
to
of
get back
those.
to my love-hate relationship with the Tempest.
But that's one of those things that I think designers do weird things like the X. Everybody knows that I love the X, but why does the X not have ADAT? ADAT is not passe technology. This is like one of those machines that
That was my first thing that I saw about the X that I was really sad about.
I
You know,
just
I
couldn't even
personally was
understand
just
it.
like,
Especially to me, I feel like there's some things that a flagship needs to have, right? And an MPC flagship, the 4000 had ADAT and a bunch of IO, the 5000 had ADAT and a bunch of IO, and then the X comes along with CV and no ADAT. I personally think it should have both, and it's a weird choice. I mean, it doesn't necessarily make me say, "Ooh, I hate the X." Not by any stretch of imagination. I love the X, but I definitely think it needed to have ADAT connection. It should have that. It's just one of those.
okay, so let me just show you this real quick. Let me
Yeah.
actually pitch it down a bit. So this is just I'm just showing this as an example. One of the reasons why I really like the design of this thing, and why anybody who criticizes it, I just think are being silly because the fact that they leave stuff like this in here on a product that's only $300 is crazy to me. So first thing I should say is that the LFO in the Neutron is digital. And
Mm-hmm.
what's really cool about this is that they didn't band limit it severely. Like a lot of times when you see a digital LFO in a piece of gear, they
Mm-hmm.
band limit it, which means they won't let it go super high in frequency because the higher frequency they go, um, it's not a high enough resolution to where it won't alias. And with this, they let it go up way past aliasing, right? So
Dope.
the
That gives
waveforms
it
start
the
getting all
character.
kinds of the waveforms start getting all kinds of janky looking, right? But that makes them sound really interesting. So right now all I have is it's like a regular, subtractive synth patch, but I'm sending the LFO into control the filter cutoff, right?
Mm-hmm.
And I have just a little bit of resonance and just listen to what it does here. So right now that sounds normal, right?
Mm-hmm.
And what I can do is, as I bring this attenuator up, I have it patched into an attenuator so I can control the amount of the LFO. So there we are, right?
Yes.
Now watch when I bring the rate up on this thing. Now most LFOs are going to start stopping right up around here. Like that's about as high as they're going to go. But watch how high this thing can go. So now
Mm.
you like these out of
That's crazy.
and that's just like, I mean, that's just a pretty, obviously I'm not getting into a deep patch where I'm controlling the rate because I can
Mm-hmm.
control all of that stuff as well. But the idea that I can kind of start getting into these sorts of things, like if you start patching like you could do like envelope 2 out, and we can take that over here to where we at here. We'll do LFO rate, all right?
Oh yeah.
And then I can kind of play with my envelopes here.
That thing has a really dope sound. It's very distinct.
Of course, I can drop these down. But basically, my point is that you're able to do things on this that you would do on a modular synth, but
Mhm.
usually not for this kind of price point. Like usually you don't see that kind of
And are
stuff.
they really dropping it for $299 or was it
Yeah,
$399?
it's going to be $299. And the thing
When is it
is like
supposed to
I
drop?
asked them about it like when I first got the prototype in and I was testing it and just trying to see if I could find flaws and that sort of thing. And I
Mhm.
said to him, I said, the LFO lets you go really high in rate and way past regular aliasing and it gets all, distorted. I said, are you guys planning on keeping it that there? Because I really like it. And I ask those kinds of questions often, and usually the answer is no, no, no. We're gonna, rein that in so that people don't hear that. Blah blah blah. And I was like, man, don't do that. But no, their answer was no. We really kind of like it, and you know, how do you
Yeah,
feel
they
about
want
it?
to
I was
keep
just
it
like,
right
keep it,
there.
keep it, because you can do like really ridiculous like vocal type effects with it, and you could just do some awesome stuff with it. And the fact that you can already cross modulate the oscillators because this is two oscillators right here. So you can do like traditional dual oscillator type sounds with it, but now you have an audio rate oscillator here that you can use as well that just kind of gets really crazy. And you can modulate the shape of it and all kinds of different stuff like that. And then you've got the analog delay on it. So just
Nice that it has
man,
delay. That's a good
it's
touch.
it's stupid fun, man.
When's it supposed to hit the market though?
I haven't seen a hard date.
Yeah.
And to be fair, I haven't looked. But I think in the next few months, like tops, like I think
Yeah.
maybe even sooner than that. Like from what I'm understanding, it's coming pretty darn soon. I think they're talking this month or next.
That's funny.
Um
Alex in the chat says supposed to be this month, but it's Behringer. Might be next year.
well see, and you know what? Let me touch on that real quick. I just want to touch on the subject
Yeah.
of and I'm not saying that I'm not saying that Alex is irritated by that. I'm just touching on the subject, so don't take it as a diss to you, Alex, at all. Um, a lot of people get irritated when they hear about gear being announced and it takes a while for it to come to market, and then they're like, "Oh well, it's just Behringer, that's why it's taking so long," or "It's just Arturia because it's taking so long." When the Matrix Brute was first announced, from then until it actually came out, so many people were saying it was vaporware and it was
Yeah.
never coming. And
Mhm.
there must be all kinds of problems. It must not be very good because it's not out yet. Same thing with the audio fuse. The audio fuse was like a 2 or 3 year process between when it was announced and when it actually came out.
But see, I can appreciate that I can appreciate the time being taken, even if it's sort of annoying
Well,
and
that's what
like
I'm getting at is
antsy,
that
right? If they're getting it right.
there's a positive, a negative, and a truth. And the positive is that you get to find out about the gear ahead of time, and that's kind of cool, right? Um, all of us that are like we eat, sleep, and breathe music technology. We love hearing about gear as soon as we possibly can. That's cool. The negative is that one, in my opinion, you blow your load. You shoot out the product info, and then the buzz wears off by the time it comes out.
Right.
So to me, I'm like, you probably shouldn't do that because of
You have
that.
to be able to balance that.
And then you also have to deal with the fact of like people not understanding the development and don't understand that, okay, well, if a product's not out yet, it doesn't necessarily mean that there's problems. It could be other things. It could be marketing issues. It could be factory issues. It could
Yeah,
be
it could be
parts
coordination
related.
between all. That's a lot of
There's
moving
a million
parts.
reasons why a piece of gear might not hit the market right away. And it could be because there could be issues that maybe they're squaring away, which me personally, I'd rather them fix the problems before I get it than be a
Then be a
paying beta
tester that
tester,
you paid.
Yeah, exactly.
Paid tester.
So there's that. But, in the long run, what I think it comes down to is, so we're finding out about this gear and then we have to decide, okay, are we really going to be that excited about it for X amount of time? Or, just take that and file it in the back of your mind that, what, I may or may not be saving up for that piece of gear in the future. I think a lot of the heads of these companies that are doing this, such as Behringer, such as Arturia, they are excited about what they're doing, so they're telling people about stuff in advance before I personally think that they should. Like me, I'm more of the mindset of, you know what, let's hold off. Don't tell everybody right away. Maybe announce 2 weeks out from launch or a month out from launch. A month, I think, is fine.
I think that's good timing.
When you start pushing 3 months, I think the excitement will start to die off a bit. But some of these companies are announcing products, and then they're like, you know what, we're
Well, I don't
shipping.
even know. 3 months is not bad, even, Ken. I mean, but when you got people that are like 6 months out, a year out, I think you shoot your load too early when you do that. And
I
it's a
personally
lot of
would rather
companies that
be
we
like,
love that have done that.
I like, and then say, and we're shipping in, a month. We're
Yeah,
shipping in
I
3
love that.
weeks. I think
That's what
that's
I
awesome.
Yep.
I just wish I had the money for every piece of gear that came out.
Of course. No doubt. So, yo, this has been good, man. It's kind of like almost like a reboot, and gonna get back on this. I actually got some pretty cool guests lined up for the next few Beat Monster show. I said Beat Monster. That was the previous group I was in, and I got the records of the CDs we put out right above me. But Beatppl shows. I got some real cool guests for some people that in the synth and Eurorack community that are doing a tour. I don't want to say who they are, but they're going to be on here the next month in May. And then I also got my man Bo Beats is going to come and be a part of the show at some point soon. We just got to lock in a date. And my man TDS is going to come back too. So looking forward to some cool things. And if we can coordinate things, I know Joe is always down to be on the show. So some real cool shows coming up here soon. So looking forward to, let me just tell you what I got coming up. I have I just released Analog Boom Bap 2 a couple weeks ago. I have Analog Boom Bap 3 ready. I just have to do some final programming changes on it to put some MPC programs in there. And I have a new kit called Modulax that is coming up, and that's going to be releasing with a Mod Bap album as well.
That's that modular laxative, right?
Yeah, no doubt. That's right. Give you Eurorack runs.
I didn't even think about it.
That's classic. So yeah, stay tuned to beatppl.com. Go up there, make sure you support, and we got some real cool stuff coming up.
Hey, as far as beatppl.com is concerned, Flux With It kits will be up on there soon too.
Damn right.
I got to get them over to you, but they'll be up there soon.
Soon as you get them to me, we'll get them up there, and so that should be pretty cool. We'll start having more of the Beatppl collective stuff on beatppl.com. So patronize and see what's up. What you got going on, Ken?
I think today or tomorrow I need to shoot. As I said, I don't typically like doing reviews, but I think I'm going to do an actual review of the Strymon Magneto. Mm-hmm. They sent it to me for press. And I know I don't get to keep it, so don't get too excited or jealous. But I am gonna do like a straight up review on it because I have some strong opinions about it. So I think I'm gonna get that up pretty darn soon. I've got some gear that's not out yet that I can't talk about yet, but it'll be ready to go as soon as the gear is announced. I'm gonna pop some videos up on that so you can keep it. My site. And as far as Flux With It is concerned, I have a bunch of new sound packs that are going to be ready, and I think I'm actually going to get them up on Beatppl and shop.fluxwithit.com first. Those two sites will be up first, and then you'll also be seeing them up on sounds.com and a few other places. So
speaking of sounds.com, I want to have Justin Myrax on the show again, talk about sounds.com and how that thing is coming, and
might not be a bad idea.
Yeah, I think it'd be a cool show to kind of talk about, because I feel like there's a changing of the guard, and even kind of like the pendulum is swinging a bit when it comes to sound design and marketplaces for sound design. So,
and as far as my show is concerned, the Synth Summit show, if people aren't aware, if you go over to my YouTube channel, which is YouTube Flux With It, I have a show called the Synth Summit Show, and that show is basically where I interview guys like, we talked about Dave Rossum earlier. He's been on the show. I've had lots of different people who create the gear that we all know and love. So I've got some new guests that are going to be on that in the next 2 weeks. I'll be starting the next season of that back up. So certainly check that out. And if you haven't seen the previous episodes and you're into samplers and synthesizers and knowing what went into the gear, what the backstory of it was, that kind of stuff, check it out. They're long shows, so you may just want to
Mhm.
put them on and listen to them as you're driving. That's a great thing about YouTube. You can stop it, come back to it later, and it'll pick up where you left off. But they
Heathcliff
are
said
long form
Sim
shows. They're
Summit is
generally speaking 2 hours or so. Yeah.
that word. So yeah, Sim Summit Show, aka Synth Nerd Paradise. It's always a dope show. There's always a lot of dope information on there. So, well, hey, we're gonna sign off, and we'll be back in the next 2 weeks. Not next week, but the following week. We'll have another show, and let's get some discussion going on. Holla at me. Be sure to follow us on all of our pages and social media. You can find me at B-Boy Tech Report on Instagram and Twitter and Facebook, and you can find me at The Beat People. That's the podcast on Twitter, and just straight up Beat People, BeatPPL on Instagram and on Facebook. And so that's what's up.
Yep.
All right, peace, y'all.